Well, I almost thought I wouldn't do this today. I haven't been able to get dressed, so you'll just have to put up with me the way I am. Oh, I was very hot and sweaty earlier, and now I'm cold again. Bloody annoying. I didn't have a good night, not at all. And I had bad dreams. And when I say bad dreams, I mean dreams that, where I seem to be expressing a lot of emotions. I mentioned on Facebook last night that I saw the last episode of something called The Scheme on the TV. I tend to avoid watching TV, and particularly reality TV, and this was reality TV. But this was about truly terribly sad people, or people in terribly sad situations. I mean, I don't want to denigrate the people themselves, and I just think, how do they get out of that? You know, they were living, the scheme is what they call this housing place, which is what we used to call council houses. And they were heroin addicts and alcoholics and potheads, and they were in and out of prison and getting pregnant, and it was just truly awful, because there just didn't seem to be a way out. You know, and you could see the new babies being born and who they were going to get brought up with, and you knew damn well that, you know, they were going to be the same. You know, I often wonder why people don't see this, you know, when they, you know, we get an awful lot of American TV here. Which I'm not complaining about at all. Most of what I watch is American. I enjoy it very much. They're very good at making TV. I mean, so are the British. They make completely different types of TV, but they're very good. But anyway, on the TV, you know, and they show all the gangs, the gang culture. And I think, doesn't anybody realise that this is unwinnable? The war is unwinnable, because if you're born into that, well, you think like that. How can you think any different? See, that's what I mean about the way we mould our children, whether we intend to or not. Children learn from us, you know, and if you're brought up in that environment, that's normal to you. It was normal to me to have the sort of parents I had. It never occurred to me it wasn't. Never occurred to me it wasn't good. And, you know, part of what I felt last night was, you know, how dare I complain about my own background when I saw this. And I do sometimes have a bit of difficulty with that. But I cannot imagine that it's any different emotionally. And that's what it boils down to. I still had my trust destroyed. I still had my body invaded. I still had... Do you know, I didn't have a clue what a boundary was. I didn't learn it. I didn't hear the word till I was in my 20s. And I didn't know what it meant until I was in my 40s. How about that? That's how long it took me to understand what boundaries meant. Because I had none. None at all. Which is why no was a very difficult word for me. But this programme truly... You know, I just think I'm very fortunate. It could have been so much worse. And this business about this trip is depressing me, I have to say. What a stupid thing to get depressed about. But I am very concerned about it. And look, I have a lot of people whom I really like, just via email or Facebook, and most of my connections that I've made have been with Americans and Canadians, most of them. I have some good British connections too, but the majority I've made are American and Canadian. Some really nice people. But I also have to say that the most awful people I've met are the same, from the same continent, and that worries me. There are two, well, John and I spoke about it last night, and I have a feeling he doesn't want to go. In fact, I'm sort of almost certain he doesn't want to go. And I'm not so sure that I do now. I love the idea, I truly do. And I would love to meet some of my knitting pals and, you know, the people I've met for all sorts of reasons. You know, just because they're survivors or just because I've met some really nice people. And, you know, I often think to myself, there are 6 billion people on this planet, and by the time I've died, I will have known just a handful. And you may think this is weird, but I look at people and I want to know about them, and I want to know about their lives. And I won't. You know, while I'm doing this, there's somebody planting rice in a field in China, and I want to know her, or him. And whilst I'm doing this, you know, terrible things are happening to people. I gave up watching the Tudors because I couldn't bear the utter brutality of the times. And they were very graphic about this on the telly, on this programme. I mean, incredibly well acted and well filmed. Everything about it was good, but just far too brutal. I mean, disturbingly brutal. For me, anyway. I mean, I just couldn't deal with it. And even now, I've gone goosebumpy, and it makes me just want to cry. And we say this stuff is 600 years old, or 500 years old, or whatever, and people don't do that anymore. But yes, they do. And, you know, in Iran recently, they tortured and then hung 2 teenage gay boys. For being gay, of course. Anyway, this brings me back to America. And yes, I know there's Canada as well, but I really don't want to upset anybody here. But America seems like a really frightening place right now. And for gay people, it's hardly welcoming at all. I have had some people suggest that we go to San Francisco. I have no idea why they would suggest such a thing, but it doesn't interest us. I don't want to go that far south for a start. But, you know, it's... America is fast becoming the Western Iran. And it looks like, you know, with the rise of people like Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann particularly, and the very idea that that woman, I mean, I think you're sleepwalking into a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. You know, and this brings me back to the Tudors and the disturbing hot pokers up the arse, literally. And burning at the stake and hanging people in chains and leaving them there to rot, or boiling people to death. When I was young, none of that stuff sort of bothered me because I thought it was fantasy. I didn't really believe it because I thought people aren't like that, but they are. And when I listened to if you had read some of the fundamentalist crap that I've been sent, it's truly very frightening. I mean, we have the Evangelical Alliance here, and they've more than hinted that they are quite willing to resist violently any suggestion that they ought to stop hassling people like me. But it's very small, and whilst they need to be stood up to, nothing like what's going on over there. Plus then there's the flying, which I truly do hate. Absolutely detest it. And to be honest, I've just been thinking, well, I can make sure I take a lot of drugs and sort of be out of it for the flight, but then I have to drive the other end. So that's not really... The thing is, if we did this in Europe, I mean, there are places in Europe I'd really want to see, like the north of Norway, and it's all drivable. And the thing about driving is, here, is I can come home if I need to. I've done that twice. The last trip we did, we came home early, because I had to. And in 2006, I came home early for the same reason. And well, it's the only reason I'd come home early, is when I've had enough. And I'll do the same this time, if that's what I need to do. If we're over there, I can't. And if I need medical attention, well, I can't afford it. It's as simple as that. There's all sorts of reasons why, as lovely as it would seem, but I guess I don't feel safe. And I know that lots of you lovely people live there, and I'm sure you're sitting here thinking, there's no reason why he wouldn't be safe. And that's because you live there. We get a completely different view from the outside. And we truly have become a really frightening country, and particularly for people who are different. And I mean, just the mere fact that somebody like Michelle Bachmann even stands a chance. I mean, the fact that Sarah Palin was elected governor of Alaska, the fact that you had Bush as a president, the fact that you're mixing up fundamentalist religion with your government, which you shouldn't be doing. Do you know, one of the things, to be quite serious a moment about this, if I can, it's not easy always to emotionally divorce yourself from things, but all this thinking, you're not going to get people to understand that being, in this case, homosexual is a natural inborn thing and not wrong and not a sign that we're demonic. You're not going to get religious fundamentalists to believe this or accept it, because they can't. You see, because if they do, they're going straight to hell. And I grew up with this, that I know the fear. You resist. It's one of the reasons I couldn't recover from my past, was because when people tried to help me, I rejected what they said because it was so against what religion said. And therefore, I couldn't admit these new ideas. And I certainly couldn't admit any idea that suggested my church was wrong, because that was the biggest evil of all. But it's also, I eventually realised, it's also why my religion was wrong. You see, because it's got nothing to do with love, it's all to do with fear. Because if you can't believe something, because you're afraid that your God will smite you if you do, then you need to realise that your religion has to be wrong. Because any religion, unless of course you want your religion to be about fear, and you want your God to be hateful, and in which case you can never actually be sure whether you're pleasing him or not, can you? That's what I figured out in the end. So I thought, fuck it, I might as well please myself. Because truly, you don't know. You can't possibly know. And I'm sorry, but you can't tell me you love God when that's what's going on. You can't. If you can't love anybody when they've got a gun held to your head, because that's what you've got. So how are you going to convince these millions of people who are uneducated, by and large? I mean, people like the Bachmans and that, I think, are just evil. And I don't mean irredeemably so, but at present evil, because they have got brains. And I think they are deliberately propagating evil, knowing they have the full mental capacity to know the evil that they're doing. So I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about General Joe Blow, Joe Public, whatever the bloody term is. You know, but they certainly understand fear, particularly if they've been brought up in an abusive manner, and an awful lot have. Oh, and I can imagine they're having fits if any of them are listening to this. How dare he suggest such a thing? My parents loved me. Smack, smack, smack. So see, it's not easy to educate people when they're afraid to be educated. See, I was afraid to think anything different to what I was told. In fact, the very idea that there was something different to think was a new revelation to me, I was gobsmacked. What, you mean there are people who think differently? There are people who think what they like and they don't worry that they're going to get sent to hell for eternity. You know, and they don't think they're wicked and evil for daring to think something different to what the nuns just told you, or your parents. Yeah, I didn't know. And then when I did begin to know, it became extremely frightening. Really, I cannot describe the terror. You see, and what you realise is there are millions of people who think like that, because we were taught to think like that. And to be presented with terror at the idea of changing that thought. So unless you can somehow, I don't know how it happened with me, except that I was blessed with a logical brain, and I began to see for myself the illogicality. And it was basically when the thing that really, I don't know who wrote it, but in one of the many books I read in my search for relief from pain, because that's really what my life's been about. Oh, do you know, this morning I felt so... I was sorting out my drugs. I had to go and collect another wagon load last night, and then I have to sort them out and get rid of old bottles and to make room for the new bottles. And do you know, I wanted to take the whole fucking lot and go and dump them in the bin outside. Seriously, I did. And then I thought, oh shit, how do I explain that to my doctor? Excuse me, but I need all my drugs again, because I had a fit of the poor me's this morning and threw them all out. Plus it would be somewhat irresponsible and dangerous to do that, since these drugs are highly potent. But anyway, sorry. Yes. In many of the books I read, I don't know who said this, but somebody, a very wise person, said that you cannot love what you fear. Did you hear that? You cannot love what you fear. Oh, and that hit home. It really did. And I realised that I had no love for my family, and they had no love for me. And that may sound a shocking thing, but how can you possibly love people who just make you feel like shit? And then I realised I didn't love God either, because that made me feel like shit. And that the nuns and priests, and then the elders and the pastors, because it didn't stop with the Catholics, oh, we're not going to go into that, but Catholic, Jehovah's Witness, born again twat, I now have nothing to do with any religion. Some people think I'm a spiritualist, but I'm not. And I can imagine one or two of my spiritualist friends hearing that and thinking, oh fuck, I didn't know that. But I'm not, sorry. I don't ascribe to any religion. None. Anyway. And I realised that they didn't know what love was either. Because it certainly wasn't fear. And love and fear are mutually exclusive. If you fear something, you certainly can't love it. So that was one of the little tiny openings into a new life for me, when I realised that. Or when I heard that and understood it. That doesn't mean that those horrors, those nightmares don't come into me every now and then. Doesn't mean that there's no self-doubt. Of course there is. I would hate not to have doubt. People who think they're absolutely right terrify me, and quite rightly so. Look what happens in the world from people. Look at 7/11, 7/7. Do you know, we've even started Americanising our dates. I've always thought it was really stupid to put... It was 9/11, wasn't it? Sorry, not 7/11. But to put the bloody month first. It's logical to put day, month, year. Or year, month, date, as some people, day, as some people do. But to put fucking month and then the day and then the year just is out of sequence. Nutty. And we're beginning to follow it. Except that, of course, 7/7, well, it was the 7th day of the 7th month. So, but it just sounds American, doesn't it? But no, we do it the correct way. Naughty boy, sorry about that. But anyway. Oh, bugger. Anyway, getting back to... So it's very difficult. I mean, these people... You've got to bear in mind that these people truly think that they're going to rot in hell forever if they even think that a homosexual person is a normal, kind, feeling, breathing individual just the same as they are. And the reason I find it so frightening, the political situation in America, is going back to the Tudors, because I can see how that happens. You know, one of the reasons everybody holds Hitler up as being the most evil man ever is because it's a lot more simple to put all of the evil on him, even though he wasn't the one who did all the killing. It was people like you and I who did all the killing, and that's what we don't want to see. It was ordinary people. My neighbours. Me. You. Your next door neighbours, your teachers, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your nephews. It was them. They killed 6 million people. Because they needed somebody to blame for their lot. But not only that, it was all based on fear. If they didn't, what would happen to them? That's why we single one person. His ideas were obviously extremely ill-informed. But the more, you know, I don't understand why people keep going on that he was an atheist, because he clearly wasn't. You only have to listen to his speeches to know that he wasn't. And he was brought up Catholic. And I think what people mean is that he clearly wasn't because of what he did, so he only pretended to believe. That's what the religionists want us to think anyway, because he certainly wasn't an atheist. But all that's by the by. The point is that he didn't do the killing himself. Ordinary people did. And that's why what is happening in America is extremely frightening. Look what happened to Matthew Shepard. Do you think that would be an isolated incident? No, of course it's not. And it wouldn't be. If these people gain power in America, God help you. And not just God help gay people. but it'll eventually be black people again, and then it'll be women, and it'll be children right from the very beginning, and it won't be long before you're being stoned in public, before you're being exactly like Iran, because don't forget the Bible's full of the same evil as the Quran is. And I don't know how you stop it. How can you explain to people? How can you get them to understand that they are good enough as they are and they're not going to be destroyed and made to suffer for eternity because they dared have compassion for their fellow man and woman and child? How can you get someone who the mere thought of it terrifies them? You know, you have to bear in mind that they have whole communities that all believe that way. And to not believe... I mean, there's some woman, I think her blog is called My Sister's Farmhouse or something. You should see what happened to her when she became an atheist. So, I mean, I don't particularly agree totally with her stance, but... Oh, that's just too complicated a subject to get into, okay. But I think I more or less am an atheist, but I'm not a... I don't believe this life is all there is, so I don't know what that makes me, but I don't... Anyway, never mind. My Sister's Farmhouse, I'm fairly certain that's what it's called. Rochelle, her name is. I mean, for God's sake, you just... No, she's intelligent, and she's strong, and she's brave. But, you know, she became an outcast immediately. So, to stand up for what's right really takes guts. It takes an enormous amount of guts. And yes, I do get fucking angry at these arseholes who are so cowardly for not standing up like she did, or like I do. You know, sometimes I feel like, oh, fuck 'em, shoot 'em dead. Of course I think that, because I'm human. But at the same time I understand, and so it gets very confusing. It really... I mean, like I was reading yesterday about Nigel Evans, a Tory MP, a fucking Tory MP, who come out as gay at the age of 54. And part of you know, really wants to hug him and feel really sorry for him. And like he says, he's wasted all his life by pretending he isn't. But he voted against gay people all the time he was in Parliament. He made gay people's lives harder. He made the lives of gay teenagers harder. And then you just get really angry with him. It's not easy. None of this stuff is easy. And I find it scary. And I really didn't think I was going to talk so much this morning. And I'm sorry there's no laughing. But I don't feel like there's anything to laugh at this morning. And I feel like I've got the flu again. It'll go. Always does. It's one of the peculiarities of my problems. Hot flushes and the chills and a runny nose, and seriously feeling like I'm about to come down with the flu or a cold or something, and then nothing happens. It just sort of stops. Anyway, listen, if you managed to get this far, thank you. Take care. God bless. Oh, bloody hell, twat. I do say that, so we're not going to get into why, or why I shouldn't, alright. Bye.